Hi everyone, it's a great pleasure to be here back in Monterey playing at the Santa Lucia Festival. And I'm going to share a little bit about what it is for me, daily practice and how I sort of refine the art of violin playing. And for me that's mostly grounded around the solo music by J.S. Bach, the sonatas and partitas. It allows me to sort of reconnect with both my bow arm, my left hand, intonation, many technical aspects, and also the musical challenges of bringing it to life and also not tampering with the purity of the music in the first place. So I'm going to play a little bit and then discuss what I think about the challenges are afterwards. So I'm going to start with the Adagio from the G minor sonata. So the adagio, it's a great way to start the day because it's a lot of bow control and string crossings and all the various intricate details that make good violin playing. Vibrato, consistent vibrato. Finding a smooth way of using the bow. So it's a good way of awakening my sensibilities to that. And then there's the fugue, which is the second movement, which I'll play now, which is technically very challenging. And musically, to keep somehow a coherent sense of the whole through this constant repetition of this one theme. The whole movement is made around variation on this one theme, played in all voices, all four voices, sometimes at the same time, other times interweaving. And so to keep that musical line throughout the whole movement and to also overcome the challenges of sometimes four voices at the same time. It's incredible. Bach had this sort of ingenuity to write that way. He must have been an amazing violinist himself, that still 300 years later we're all challenged by it. So I'll play the fugue. violin getting used to the... the Mexican air. Thank you. Well, the fugue, as you can see, it's a great warm-up because you have many musical ideas to play with and challenges to sort of maintain 4 parts at the same time. And anyway, look forward to coming back and maybe meeting some of you in person. Thank you.
So, hello, my name is Joachim Horsley. I'm an American composer and arranger and pianist. And my background is in writing film music and television music. And I have a project that is called Via Havana, and we're doing a branch of that project called Napoli on Havana, in La Habana, in Mexico. We're playing at the Santa Lucia Festival. I'm playing with my friend Charlie Siem and my band. And what we do is we're doing a fusion of classical music and different Caribbean rhythms, many Cuban rhythms, some rhythms from Martinique and other countries in the Caribbean, and different rhythms from different cultures. What I'm most interested in is the fusion project, and I thought today it would be nice to talk a little bit about arranging and what my sort of philosophy on arranging and why. Well, let's start with why do an arrangement of something new. You know, if there's a rhythm or a song from the Caribbean that has been going on for decades and has its own tradition, why do something new and blend it with classical music, which has, of course, has hundreds of years of tradition in Europe? And why do this kind of fusion? Why take this stuff that is, you could say, perfect on its own and blend it together? And it's an important question to ask yourself if you want to be an arranger or a composer, because in order to really have your music make an impact, it has to have purpose. You have to have a reason for doing an arrangement. So just to show that you're clever or you want to try it, that's fine at home or when you're practicing and you're developing ideas. But when you bring things out to a public, the whole point of music, remember, is to make a connection to people. It's a way to talk to people, communicate with people in a way that you can't do with any words in any language. Everyone can feel music if it's properly communicated. And so to me, taking Caribbean rhythms, for example, which are a fusion in and of themselves from African traditions and other European traditions and some music from the United States as well, and blending it with classical music, the reason I like to do this is because it's a way to say, you could say these kinds of music can be close friends if they're presented in a certain way. And I like to think that everyone in the world can be friends with anyone else in the world if they know how to connect. And so for me, the spirit and the joy of this project is really putting what I guess is ostensibly contrasting musical styles and putting them together, and then you realize they're part of a great human story and it works really well. And so that's kind of my approach and my perspective for this project. And I mention that first because I think it's very important when you are thinking about composition and arrangement, you're always thinking about, you want to say something with meaning to people. You want to bring some kind of, you could say, perspective or point of view to music. And even when you're playing any kind of style of music, there has to be a perspective, no matter what. So I'll talk about one piece that is part of my project. This is, if you're familiar with Mozart's Requiem Mass, there is a great famous part of that piece called the Lacrimosa. And of course, the Mass is basically a religious piece, and it comes from the Catholic tradition in Europe. And I have a song that blends the Mozart style with a tradition from Cuba called son music. Son music is kind of the mother of salsa music that developed in the last, you could say, 60 years or more. And basically, it's a combination of a rhythm that is essentially Caribbean and Cuban with a classical concept. So the original classical piece, if you know it, is in 3. And so forth. And the son rhythm has a sort of a different feel and style, and it's also in 4/4. So it's this kind of pattern instead of dum bam bam dum bam bam dum. And so I'll show you the construct, and then I'll tell you the purpose of this whole idea. So really, my arrangement Lacrimosa starts like this. So forth. So the idea is that you've taken the original thing, which is, and adapted it in a. So obviously we've changed the rhythm and we've made a choice. So right in the very beginning, we've made a choice, right? We've made a choice about how are we going to present this music in this new context? Why are we going to do it? For me, what I find really, really interesting is, without going too much into it, you have this you have totally different world perspectives that you're blending here. It's not just two kinds of music. So on one hand, you've got the Catholic tradition of the Mass. It's a European religion. And if you think about the origins of the Christian religion and the music that evolved from that, classical music essentially came from the Christian religion in Europe, all the construct of melody and harmony is about looking to a God that's like way up high in heaven, right? So you have these beautiful, these kind of melodies that reach up to the sky. That's the aesthetic of classical music over time. And so even as it became more secular, that aesthetic still stayed. And so the emphasis was less on rhythm, you could say, though of course it's rhythmic music too, but the emphasis is really on harmony and melody and this idea that you're reaching towards a deity that's up here in heaven. On the other hand, rhythms from the Caribbean, many of which come from African traditions, their religious point of view was totally different. So in Yoruba traditions, for example, the gods are in the earth and the ocean. So dancing is very important because that puts you closer to God. So music having a dance feel is a religious experience in that tradition. So on one hand, you can see if you have the idea that your God is in the earth and the ocean, that's a very different way to live and exist on this planet than if you're thinking about God up in heaven. So when you blend these two kinds of music, you have to really know that what you're doing is they're totally different points of view about how our existence is structured. And to me, that's very fascinating because when you're doing arrangements, you are always looking for as much contrast as possible. That's what makes music interesting. You want to take experiences and see if you can show them against each other. Because after all, if something is just one color if you look at a painting and it's all shades of blue, it might be interesting. But imagine going through a gallery and seeing 10 pictures and they're all blue, and then the last one is vibrant and yellow. You will have the experience of the change. That experience of the change and the contrast that you're experiencing, in that moment, that is when you start to experience that's when you have the potential to be moved. It's the contrast. And music in general, as you think about, let's say, when you learn in school, you learn, Schenkerian analysis, that it all boils down to everything's just 1, 5, 1, right? So you always have, basically all classical music boils down to that experience. It has a start, it has a point of tension, and then it returns to something here. So in a way, all arrangement is just a manipulation of that, right? So the sort of simple idea of going, right, you expected me to do something there, and I did something different. That is essentially all that arranging is. It's playing with expectations, it's playing with setting the listener up to expect something, and right when the expectation is established, you change. You do something different to make it interesting, and you take them in a different direction. And how you mold that whole journey, it's like a story, all right? So you're always telling a story. So again, it goes back to, you have to have a perspective and something to say with the music. So when you're doing an arrangement, you have to have this, it all goes back to this. It comes back to storytelling and using music to construct an interesting story, right? So just getting back to this project. So the whole idea behind bringing these Caribbean rhythms and classical music together, like what we're going to do in the festival, we're going to take some Neapolitan songs by Curtis and adapt them with different Caribbean rhythms, Cuban rhythms. So one reason why this is interesting is because these are these incredibly passionate, old-fashioned Italian songs. And the Cuban rhythms that we're going to do, they're also have their own kind of passion. So there are some things to reconcile when you're doing these kinds of arrangements together. So, and then Torna a Sorrento, you have again, you have a 3/4 thing. But what we're going to do is we're going to put it in another Cuban old-fashioned son montuno sort of rhythm. So. So this idea of adapting it into this dance rhythm is kind of, that's the framework of the project. Now, you might be asking, there's a certain way that these Italian songs go, so how do you just adapt it? What do you consider when you're going into the other style, you could say? Well, obviously, you want to make it the best of both worlds, not a pale imitation in both worlds, right? So how do you make the fusion successful? And I think the way to do it is, again, you just have to focus on communication and a type of appreciation for both perspectives. On one hand, what is the essence of the Italian songs that we all really like? They're dramatic, they're passionate, they're about lost love and longing for nostalgia, all these incredibly things that we associate with those songs. And of course, that kind of spirit exists in many Cuban songs, but I think that the idea that it's a dance is very interesting. So you have to, on one hand, preserve the passion of the Italian. Right, you have to preserve that while you have to have a strong rhythm. And so that's something you have to consider. So the challenge is really to find a way to be passionate and rhythmic at the same time. And so going back to Lacrimosa, when we play this opening, this structure that I've had. This is based on a typical Cuban style called guajira, which is essentially means peasant girl, but it's a very common kind of Cuban song, you could say. There's a lot, like a typical guajira opening would be on the tres guitar, You hear this kind of rhythm in, Latin rock and all sorts of. It's very, very popular, and of course in Americas, in the salsa movement, it's been used many times. But the idea is that you have this song. It's typically it's singing about a girl that you're in love with, right? So if you have this kind of, you have to know that perspective and the history of that song, so that if you're going to do this mournful kind of old-fashioned thing. There has to be something that is informed from that classical side and something that's informed from that Cuban side. So I keep those things in mind when I'm playing, and I try to, when I perform it, I try to really commit to, it's not like a respect for both worlds, yes, but it's not all about that. It's more about trying to passionately express the beauty of the history of each style. So when I perform, I'm thinking like this, like. I guess what I'm saying is I'm trying to develop a fusion sound that captures some of the sensitivity of the classical side and the groove and passion through rhythm of the Caribbean side. And I encourage you, if you think about arrangement, and maybe there's a project you have in mind if you're an arranger or a composer, as you're thinking about what you're going to do, no matter what it is, whether it's for a film or even just an arrangement for different instruments from a classical source, think about the purpose. An arrangement is an enormous opportunity to respectfully offer a perspective that is not there yet. It's a way to say something, really. And before you start writing the music, before you assemble the music, it's always important to make a decision about what it is you want to say. Away from your instrument, whether it's a decision that is informed by your life experience. Maybe you, like me, you're interested in the history of Caribbean music, so you want to know what made people tick 200 years ago on the island of Cuba. Who knows? It's up to you. You have something to say when you make the arrangement, and I encourage you to be very bold and don't be afraid to take chances and take risks. Don't be intimidated by the fact that Beethoven is this master on one hand, and you've got Cuban masters on the other hand. And you have something to say if you're a human being on this earth, and when you're arranging, that's an opportunity to sort of stand on the shoulders of giants and make your own statement. Thanks.